This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News. News-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Good evening, boys and girls, scholars and laymen. This is R2C2H2, the artivist, once again for We All Be News, radio, TV, whatever, special report. Actually, doing a movie review. I recently saw Miles Davis' Kinda Blue, not Kinda Blue, I'm thinking about albums. I saw the movie Miles Ahead starring Don Cheadle as Miles Davis, and I want to get a quick review of my thoughts about the whole movie and whatnot. Right now, I'm broadcasting on doing this review from the grave of one of the greatest swing band leaders of all time, James Melvin Lunsford, known as Jimmy Lunsford, who was one of Miles Davis's childhood heroes. When he was in East St. Louis growing up, he used to listen to Jimmy Lunsford broadcast live with his orchestra from the Cotton Club back in the 30s. And he's a musical hero of mine as well, because Jimmy Lunsford started music education in the Memphis city schools as a volunteer back in the 1920s. Now that's a great debater, Disney-like movie waiting to happen, and I'll probably be telling that tale, but I just want to say all this to say that I saw the movie, and I thought that Miles Ahead was more NWA than the movie Straight Outta Compton. Oh, shoot. Let me say it again. I thought Miles Ahead, the movie, was more NWA than the movie Straight Outta Compton. They had more motherfuckers in that movie than probably the entire 2 hour plus of Straight Outta Compton. And I say all this to say because Miles Davis is a very interesting figure, very complex. He's a Gemini, so there's a duality to Mr. Miles Davis. And since we live in a microwave society, a pop, bang, instant gratification society, I want to take the time to not only talk about the movie, but also a little bit of a background about who was Miles Dewey Davis, one of the greatest music prophets of any era, of any century, of any millennia. Miles Davis, of course, is from East St. Louis. He did not have the typical background of the stereotypical jazz musician. Matter of fact, his father was a very wealthy man who owned several hundred acres of land, raised pigs, and was a successful dentist, and also known as a political power broker in East St. Louis, kind of like a black Joe Kennedy. And his father was a successful financial accountant in Arkansas for white people, and he owned several hundred acres of land as well. So Miles Davis did not come from no impoverished working class background. He came from very much an upper middle class lifestyle, kind of like Dr. King. You know, he came from upper middle class black family lifestyle. And you know, you read Miles' autobiography, which I think is recommended reading for any music lover as well as lovers of black history and the importance of telling our story. Miles Davis talked about when he first went to New York to pursue his music career. One of the first things he did was ask a police officer on horseback where could he go in New York City to ride horses. So this is the type of background that he comes from. So I say let's get back to the movie Miles Ahead, which is interesting because this takes place during Miles Davis' famous self-imposed retirement for 5 years back in the 70s, which ended in 1980 with the re-emergence of his career. He took a 5-year break. He was mentally, fiscally, and spiritually burnt out from all this prolific protein output of music as well as his lifestyle choices. Miles, at the beginning of his career, had a heroin problem. real bad addiction that he kicked back in the mid-50s to go on his, like, you know, get in his prime. Like, you know, it ended the 50s with Kinda Blue, one of the greatest, if not the greatest jazz album ever created. Is up there, if you compare albums, it's up there with Thriller, with Michael Jackson's Thriller in terms of its influence in jazz. It's the best-selling jazz album of all time for obvious reasons. You have Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Julian Cannonball Adderley, Wynton Kelly, Bill Evans, Paul Chambers, Jimmy Cobb. You have some of the best at their positions doing what it do. So, yeah, so he kicked his heroin habit. And then he had some other bad problems. He had like a real bad, degenerate, chronic hip thing. I think he had his hip replaced. Had some other health issues. So he was using drugs, some like cocaine, which they showed in the movie. And Miles ended up living to be 65 years old, and which is interesting because what he did was, I believe, what helped him stay alive was just that he loved boxing so much that he actually would train with boxing trainers. I believe one of his boxing trainers was Sugar Ray Robinson's boxing trainer, and he was good friends with Sugar Ray Robinson. So Miles Davis was a big fan of the fight game, and I think that helped him, by him training the way he did with boxing, helped him trying to sustain his life force a little bit longer to give us some incredible music. So I think that was important, and they made an emphasis of that in the movie. They had the punching bag in the basement. So I think that's fascinating. And also, I would say too that his fight with the industry. You know, Miles Davis' background. You know, he liked to do music his way. He was very much a visionary. He was very iconoclastic in his approach to music making, and also he was somewhat of a businessman, given his background that both his father and grandfather were successful businessmen and entrepreneurs. So it was a scene in the movie where he approached his music company and music label Columbia, and he actually shot at the A&R person in the room. It kind of reminded me of the struggles that Prince had with Warner Brothers when he had the slave marker on his face. And so it reminded me of that. You know, as a matter of fact, Miles had the afro in the movie. And one thing that it did do that NWA Outta Compton did not do, it focused a little bit on Miles' issue with women. It made hints at his sometimes volatile relationships with women. Unlike in NWA Outta Compton, they basically like Disney-fied, you know, Dr. Dre's past history with domestic violence as relates to women. The movie did not shy away from that, nor did it shy away from his drug issue. So I thought the movie was good for that, but also the movie was kind of strange. It took a weird twist from a biopic that I'm used to doing, especially with musicians. I don't know if it's someone that was fantasy or real. It really went into a gangster stretch there. And if you see the movie, which I recommend you seeing, check out that gangster element in the movie, because you always had gangsterism in the music business anyway, going back to the early days of the music business. You look at, for example, most of the clubs back in the Roaring 20s, when jazz was in its infancy, getting this identity, they were controlled by the mob, by the gangsters. You know, Al Capone controlled most of the clubs in Chicago. The Cotton Club was controlled by Oni Madden, the Killer, the Irish gangster who ended up moving to Hot Springs, Arkansas to retire. But he owned the Cotton Club, and then like a lot of clubs that these people had to play in were controlled by gangsters. Matter of fact, Louis Armstrong's long-term manager, Joe Glacier, had connections to the Chicago outfit, the Chicago mob. So you always had that mob element in the music industry. But I think it was interesting that how they used it in Miles Ahead is worth checking out and analyzing. And also, I would say this as well. I think John Cheadle did a phenomenal job of channeling Miles Davis, like his mannerism, his voice. I think it helped that Don Cheadle is from Kansas City, Missouri. I call it Missouri. So, like, you know, Miles is from the Midwest, so he was able to channel Miles' energy and the lingo and the swagger that Miles had, and also the use of the word motherfucker. He used it very well and very musically, like Miles would do. So I think it was worth seeing on that alone. But my issue with a lot of these movies too, like they had the white navigator, like the white narrator in the movie. And I think it's important that black folks now, we feel more comfortable in telling our story on our terms. Like, you don't need the white person to make this movie safe for white people consumption is very interesting because gangsterism is as American as apple pie. So there's no need for a white narrator to make it safe for consumption. Miles Davis was very popular among white people anyway. I mean, he sold out festivals and concerts, would attest to that during his career, and also his staying power. The white people still listen to his music to this day. So Miles is very fascinating, and it made a reference to the incident when Miles was performing in Birdland, outside of Birdland, when he was attacked by police officers. Even though he told the police officer, hey, I'm headlining Birdland, my name is right here, I'm not loitering. They wanted him to move along. They attacked him. So it made a reference to that and kind of reminded me of NWA, the timing of it all with the Black Lives Movement, Lives Matter movement, and police brutality being a very much red button issue in America today. So I'm glad that it was a movie made about Miles' life. It also talked about, his wife Frances Davis, who was his muse. She was on a couple of his album covers, including Someday My Prince Will Come. Very beautiful sister, classically trained dancer, was Miles' obsession, maybe not always healthy obsession. And, I think it was interesting because Miles had several wives. And it's quite interesting to note that one of his wives was Cicely Tyson. We admire Cicely Tyson for her strong portrayals of black women on the screen and on the TV screen as well as on the big screen. But she actually was on one of Miles' wives, and she actually came back when he was dying to take care of him. So it's like Miles is a very complex figure, so to speak. Like, he wasn't afraid of embracing beautiful black women, but also he wasn't afraid to dealing with strong personalities. But I think the movie did a good job of highlighting some of his shortcomings. But also, I think that hopefully if enough people see it, it'll get more people interested in learning more about Miles on their own term, because there's no good reason why you can't learn more about this phenomenal man. He got all these songs and albums out there for your consumption, documentaries. Hell, you even got people still around that actually played with him or heard him live. So you got all types of sources to go to learn more about Miles Davis' career. Now, I would definitely be interested in seeing more movies made about Miles Davis' life, because this touched on the time during his 5-year retirement. During that time, Miles also suffered a stroke, so he had a lot of serious health issues throughout most of his life. So in order to overcome the stroke, to get back playing in his right hand, he actually picked up painting as a hobby and became a second career. And matter of fact, I really enjoyed a lot of Miles Davis paintings. They're very fascinating works of art. It's kind of like he put his music on canvas and it moves with the colors, like the colors are sounds. So I would, let people know they should, you can go to an exhibit of Miles Davis paintings, or you can look at it online. Very fascinating work. So Miles Davis was a true Renaissance man. He was a true creator, a true God among us, where he used his tools and stuff to create his reality. But yeah, he took up painting because he had a stroke, I believe, or either a heart attack. He had to recover his playing form in his hand. So I think there's more to the Miles Davis narrative. This is not the definitive Miles Davis biography or biopic by any means. I think that they should cover something about his younger years as well as even his later years after semi-retirement, because there's so much stuff to pick there. And I think it's very important that black folks start telling these stories on our own terms, meaning that we start producing these things, we start directing, acting, writing. Don't wait for Hollywood to greenlight these stories, because they may never be told. And I think it's very important, because when I look at movies like this, I think about Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. Like he said, to paraphrase, the Invisible Man, if you don't tell your story, you will always be a marginal or invisible character in the telling of your story. And one thing about Miles Davis I like about the movie, it kind of hinted to, but not really unless you really know about Miles Davis, is that his resilience factor, how he was able to come back for so many things in his life. Like somebody once told me, a setback is a setup for a comeback. And Miles Davis had to come back a lot, both personally and professionally. I believe, in my opinion, that in order for him to be great, he had to make peace with his demons and learn how to make the most of his regrets. He had to make peace with his demons and learn how to make the most of his regrets. So I think there's less to be learned about Miles Davis, but I would definitely tell people to go see Miles ahead. Don Cheadle gave a very award-winning performance, channeled Miles Davis greatly. The storyline is interesting. It kind of reminds me of Straight Outta Compton and Pulp Fiction, all that mixed together. You know, very interesting storyline. I think Don Cheadle was actually challenging Samuel Jackson as well too, but that's another story. But please go support this movie. We need to see more movies like this. I would love to see a Sam movie biopic sometime very soon. I would love to see several, like Jimmy Lunsford biopic that I'm going to work on, I guess, very soon, at least a documentary. But in the words of the great Duke Ellington, we love you madly. Keep producing and pushing. If you like what you heard on this video, please feel free to subscribe and share and donate to the We All Be movement, because we all be in it to win it.